believe in your own family and dear friends. And it's Drechsel. It's like Drexel. And I'm sure, I wasn't born in Drechsel, but I'm sure the Germans that came over had the same problem we have pronouncing it, so they just changed it to Drexel. But it's Drechsel.
Okay, so that helps everybody out.
People say Drechsel, everything. You know how it is.
So when we did the PEO program, when we did the book about the Cowtown ladies, Nancy was one that we decided would be really wonderful on that, because she has, in my understanding, you have grown up in Fort Worth.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that and about your family and where you went to school and so forth.
Okay, I'll be happy to. I'm the oldest of 4 children. My dad was from Berkeley, California, and my mother was from Fort Worth also. And anyway, they moved here after World War II, and my father had worked in a hardware store when he was a kid, and they moved to California for about 4 years, and he worked for the hardware store, and then he got another job selling hardware for a company, around California, Berkeley, California, and then they built a home in Concord, which is, I always called it Walnut Creek, but I don't know that it was Walnut Creek. I think it was Concord. Anyway, we lived there till I was 4, and then we moved back to Fort Worth, and my grandfather had a lumber yard in East Fort Worth on Hampshire. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Fort Worth. And this was like 1951, and so Daddy decided, it was right after the war, and they decided to start a lumber yard. And they called it Red Rooster Lumber Company because my mother was an artist and she could paint a rooster head. And over the years, it was funny too, that people would come in the lumber yard and say, I want to speak to Mr. Rooster. That was his name. People over the years said, why didn't you just call it O'Neill Lumber? Which that is a little more dignified, like Quarles or Teague or whatever. But anyway, my father had a lumber yard, and we lived with my grandparents on the corner of Meadowbrook Provine for 2 years. Mother and Daddy and my sister and I in their bedroom. You know how bad it was back while he started the lumber yard. And anyway, and then that business was in business, over 60 years. Now it's not there anymore. We had one in East Fort Worth on Lancaster at 820, and then we have one in Richland Hills. Anyway, my parents built a home on Provine Street, which is in East Fort Worth. Do you know where Meadowbrook Elementary is? It looks a lot like Poly High School in Arlington Heights because they were built CCC programs. And to me, they look like what a school should look like, for our age, very traditional. Anyway, we lived with my grandparents. We moved 2 blocks down the street into a house that my dad did a lot of I don't know how he did it. He had a lumber business, and he also built the house. And so they lived there till my mother passed away. And it was a lovely home. And I have 3 younger siblings. I'm the oldest. My name's Nancy, and then Jeannie. I have a brother named Chris and a sister named Mary O'Neill. That was our home name. And I went all the way through school in East Fort Worth, starting at Meadowbrook. Well, actually, I went to a pilot program of kindergarten. Remember that time where there wasn't kindergarten? At Tandy Elementary, which is no longer in existence. There's a nursing home there now. And then I went to Meadowbrook Elementary, Meadowbrook Junior High, Eastern Hills High School, and then I went to North Texas for 2 years because I couldn't get my parents to let me go to Texas, University of Texas. Too big, they thought. So I was just lucky to get out of town. And, you know, back in those days, and when you're the oldest, they don't know how much they can afford. My other 3 siblings all graduated from SMU. But all of a sudden, things changed. But actually, I loved going to the University of Texas. It wasn't that big to me because it's like anything else. You have your little circle of friends, and I think I got a really good education there. I went to North Texas too for 2 years, and I enjoyed that too. Anyway, then after college, I don't know. What did you ask me?
I wanted to ask you, what was it like being the oldest child?
Well, you know how when you're the oldest, you're always, and I was the oldest cousin too. So you're always kind of put in charge, like, well, all the adults are going to sit in the dining room and all the kids in here. Nancy, you be in charge. Well, then you become bossy. And then everybody thinks you're bossy. So they would call me Bossy Cow or, you know, Nanny Goat or whatever.
Well, we have that in common because I'm the oldest child too, the oldest cousin. So we're in a mosh group together on Tuesday, and one of the girls said, she didn't ask me if I was bossy. Somehow she asked me how I got to be so competitive. And I said, well, I think it's because I was the oldest child and I had a lot of responsibilities.
Oh, yeah.
So we have that in common. So just call us the bosses. We never do anything done.
Right. Well, that's just how I think
And we
it was.
both taught school.
Yes.
You taught science.
I taught elementary school. That was my certification. And back when I got certified, it was K through 8. So you could teach anything there. I taught everything over my teaching career from, I taught 1st grade. No, I did not teach 2nd grade. I think that's the only grade I didn't teach, or kindergarten. I never taught those 2 grades. But I enjoyed it. I think I got a real good teaching education at the University of Texas. It was very strong. My sister got hers from SMU, and she was a teacher also. And my other sister is a teacher currently. But I don't think their program was as strong. Now it may be totally different now, but I just seemed to come out of college knowing what to do, you know, because of the way that was handled.
So Nancy's pretty new PEO member. I think, what, is it a year or 2 years?
Year. This is my 2nd year.
So when we got ready to have, get signed up for hostesses, Nancy said, oh, I'll do Christmas. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. I don't know that she knew at the time that we have 40 people that come to Christmas lunch. But we really appreciate that. And she was just remodeling her home and just painted the kitchen a beautiful blue color.
It is very good. Y'all saw it.
So,
Probably went, oh, I don't know if we were doing that.
so as a new
Sorry with her.
as a new member, Nancy, so what do you like most about PEO?
Well, I just think the women in PEO that I've met in our group seem to have a lot of kind of gear. I mean, in a way that you don't have to have your special friend to come to a meeting, or that everybody doesn't have to be the same age. I really like that. I like the fact that we're a multi-age group. I lived in a small town for 8 years. That's the only time I didn't really live in Fort Worth, in Rosenberg, Texas, down by Houston. And because it was a little town, now I think it's bigger just because, you know, how Houston's grown. But we had all different ages of people in our groups and professions. You know, you had one friend who was a lawyer, one that was the pharmacist, one that was had the furniture store, the jewelry store. I just liked that, the diversity of.
Yeah.
It just brought more to the
And we are.
table, and I like that.
I like that too.
So I have a question, Suzanne, if you don't mind. When we were at your house, you have a wall that seems to be a tribute to a band.
Well,
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I can. And in fact, I don't know if I have all my pictures rehung yet, but that's my husband's wall. Because he loves music, he loves country music, concerts, well, he just likes any kind of music. So, you know how it is in your house where they act like they don't have anything? And so that's kind of his wall right there.
And that's his favorite band?
Oh, no, it's not the same. There's all different artists out there.
Oh, okay.
You know, so, and the Bob Dylan kind of black and white one was up there, my son painted for my husband. And my husband is actually younger than me. He's 11 years younger. Yeah, really, I robbed the cradle. So cute. It was so funny because Dad's very younger than me, and I was single. My husband and I divorced, and I met Gary, and my friend who fixed us up told me about him and said, well, y'all ought to go out. And I said, he's too young for me. I mean, I would just never do that. And she said, well, you don't have to get married. I would have fun together. Yeah, sure enough. Look at you now. And we'll be married 30 years. This year.
So if you were gonna have a few of your PEO friends over for dinner, and you had to prepare your most favorite dish, what do you cook that we would just all love?
Well, probably some of the same things y'all like. You know, as far as a kind of a casserole dish, I mean, you can't beat like Mexican chicken, but everybody has that. We'd probably have steaks or something.
Oh, wow. So, tell us a little bit, I know you have books in your house. What are you, if you're reading anything now, and if you're not, what's your favorite all-time book?
I don't know that I have a favorite all-time book, but I'll tell you a book I've read probably 40 times. And I'm not exaggerating.
That's kind of a favorite.
I taught 4th grade for the last 15 years for my teaching career. And then we became departmentalized, so I had more than one class a day. And I think one year had 3, because that's the way we rotated. It became departmentalized. So I had to read it more than once. But I read a book that was about Texas history, because in 4th grade you teach Texas history. And this book, and it wasn't that well written. It was just a small book that came with the social studies adoption about Pioneer, Texas. And it was about a German family that moved to Texas, and it settled here. And all they went through, and one of the ancestors wrote the book. And I have to tell y'all, I could even get this in this mood right now. I'm not a real crier or anything, but in this book, on the 9th chapter, is Mama's Gone. Well, they had landed they called it Indian Beach. But it was really, you know where Matagorda is in Texas? That was where this family ended up. They traveled from Germany. They went to Galveston. They stayed there for a while. Then they went to this place up the coast there, Intercoastal Canal. And it was November, and it was cold. They had to be on the beach for months. And they had dug out. I mean, it was back in the 1840s. And anyway, this family, that was the main deal, was the mother, the dad, and the little girl. And you can tell from Mama's Gone when Mama died. Every time I read that chapter to my class, every time I cried. And of course they would be crying too. But it was just so touching to me, and I've always and even now just telling y'all, I guess that's my favorite book. Just because I think I really hooked my kids into history and social studies that year, because it is interesting, Texas history. Luckily, we have kind of an interesting history. I'm sure other states do too. But that, I guess.
So what's the name?
Let me see. What is the name of the book? I have to think now. A Paradise Called Texas.
Oh.
And it's probably not in print. It's just little. you know, and I had enough for every kid to follow along as I read. And, you know, to me as a school teacher too, I just think that's the most important thing as an elementary school teacher is to read to the kids. They loved it. And every time I'd read something, Miss Piggle Wiggle or whatever I was reading, if we went to the library once a week too, because that's what you do in schools. And they would always want to read one of those, that same author's book. That's how you turn them on to reading, you know. Anyway.
With sharing.
Yes, yes.
So
Now I read big girl books.
Okay, so I have another my last question for you, and then I'll see if anyone else has something they would like to ask. But is there anything that you have on your bucket list that you want to do in your journey in life as you continue on? Anything that you've not done that you want to do, like parachute out of an airplane, zip line, or?
No, I don't think I want to. Well, I have zip line, very short zip line, but that was fun. And I did a hot air balloon ride on my 50th birthday. So
You're pretty adventurous.
yeah, it was adventuresome. But I guess the only thing I want to do is travel. I haven't traveled that much. And my husband, he traveled quite a bit before we knew each other. So he's not as excited about going overseas. We did go to Ireland. But I'd like to do a little bit more of that, and I hope to take my daughter and son maybe on a trip if he won't go. So I'll do some of that. Haven't gotten around to it yet.
Well, Ireland would be a great
Oh, it's wonderful.
place. That's on my bucket list. So, does anybody else have anything they wanted to ask Nancy?
I just wonder if she's always been this shy. Bring her out.
Well, you know, I think I will say this. I think one reason I can do this, and Suzanne probably agree, be a school teacher.
Yeah.
You know, that's something you learn to do is get in front of people. And that's something I tried to do with my students, because in 4th grade, some of y'all probably know this, is with the testing, they have to write. That's the big thing to teach in 4th grade. And there are some kids that are afraid to even read what they wrote in front of the class. And, you know, I wasn't horrible about forcing them to, but after a while, if they were shy, I would just say, you know, you just got to do it, because it's part of learning and part of learning how to do something. You hear about people, oh, I can't be the PTA president because I can't get in front of people.
So you gave them the opportunity to be a 4th grade Toastmaster.
There you go. Sit in the author's chair.
Sit down. I think that's all. Well, you did great.
Well, good.
So,